My wife and I are leaving on vacation in a few days. We'll be back on September the 8th, and until then I will be completely unreachable. But before I go, I want to leave you with a couple of notes on communication. Now let's talk about the difference between communicating with an introvert versus communicating with an extrovert. Now remember, to say someone is introverted is just to say that they are charged up by being alone, and that being around people drains them. And to say that someone is an extrovert means the opposite. They're charged up by being around people, and being alone drains them. Let's start by looking at communication with introverts. Now I'm an introvert. You might have noticed from the way I talk on my videos and from the fact that most of my website's content is written. With this in mind, when you're communicating with an introvert, you want to listen carefully after you ask a question and wait for a while for the response to come out. An introvert is processing things internally. Unlike an extrovert who processes things out loud, thinks about things out loud, feels things out loud, the introvert is thinking and feeling and processing internally, and it might take a while for the response to your question to come out. Another thing is that when you're talking to an introvert, you want to talk about one thing at a time if you really want to get their attention, because if you talk about several things and your conversation is kind of scattered across a bunch of topics, it's easy for the introvert to get lost because they're processing everything internally and they focus well on one thing at a time. Another thing when communicating with introverts is to communicate in writing if possible. An introvert would prefer a note or an email to a telephone call or a quick conversation in the hall as you're passing. So write that note, send that email to the introvert, and you'll probably get a better response. Lastly, when you're talking to an introvert, don't finish their sentences. Okay, they have something that they want to say, but if you go ahead and say what you think they want to say for them, it's just frustrating to them. They're trying to express what they're feeling or thinking inside. Give them time and space to do it. Don't finish their sentences. Alright, now talking to extroverts or communicating with extroverts. When you're communicating with someone who is charged up by being around people, let them talk and think out loud, because they process things, they think about things, and they feel things externally. So if you keep them from talking, you're keeping them from thinking, and you're keeping them from processing, and you're keeping them from feeling. So let them talk, let them process things out loud. Also, when you're talking with an extrovert, include a variety of topics. Extroverts find it boring to concentrate on one thing at a time, and you'll lose their attention unless you include a variety of topics or subjects in your conversation. So you'll often see extroverts bouncing from one thing to another, and you need to be comfortable with that. Especially if you're an introvert, you might need to let them go a little bit, just in order to keep their attention, keep their interest in the conversation. When you're communicating with an extrovert, communicate verbally. That means make the telephone call, stop them in the hall, and talk to them, as you're passing, rather than sending an email or writing a note, because the email and the note are going to be forgotten, but some interaction with a human being is going to be remembered. It's going to have more of an impact. Also, when you're communicating with an introvert, expect immediate action. They don't want to take the subject and go and think about it for a while, like an introvert does. An extrovert wants to do something about it now, generally. Also, when you're communicating with an extrovert, keep the conversation moving. Don't allow too much dead air space. Keep talking and keep things moving. You'll keep their interest, and you'll have more of a memorable communication experience with the extrovert. Even while you're thinking about and practicing all these things, don't forget the communication advice in Colossians 4:6. It reads, "Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man." And that is advice that can apply whether you're an introvert or an extrovert.